So, if you're a minute or two beyond 9 o'clock when we started the call, just to let you know, we are recording this because we had several people who reached out to Cindy. Cindy, you want to introduce yourself right quick?
I can. I'm sorry, my video is not working. It's saying that there's no camera, and I'm looking at a camera. So I don't know what the problem is. But anyway, my name is Cindy. I'm the manager of communications and partnerships here at the Community Foundation of West Georgia. And last year, I also took on the role as grants administrator. So I work in the software that we call the GLM, where you go in and apply for the grants. And I'm kind of the questions and answers girl. So if you ever have any questions about it, you can reach out to me.
Thank you so much. But anyway, thank you all. We just thought we do have some changes to some of the grant applications this year. And so, and we've not done a grant workshop in a while. And so I could kind of update you all on kind of the trends. I don't know if some of you know how our system operates, but basically, how almost all of our grant programs work is we actually have volunteers from the community who serve on grant panels to review them. We do not, like for instance, with the community impact grant, which is the biggest round that we do not assign a specific amount of money to those categories. We just ask them to rank them and to give us their top applications, and they can recommend funding. And then we take all of that, and then we hope and pray it comes really close to the amount of money that we have available. So, so we do use outside evaluators to help us with our grant process. They in turn make a recommendation to our grants committee, which is a subset of our board. They review them and then they go to our full board. So that just kind of gives you a heads up. So Cindy, if you go ahead and bring up the slides, we'll go ahead and go from there. And if you have some questions while we're going through this, feel free to throw them in the chat, and then Cindy can help me kind of grab those, so we can go from there. All right. Next slide, please, ma'am. So, so what we'll be basically doing today is going over the grant requirements for the 2025 grant application process. We'll be discussing those application changes that we have. And in addition, we also will talk about some application tips. My goal is to help you make our evaluators have the hardest job ever. We want you guys to stay, quote unquote, what we call on the table, basically, stay in the mix as long as possible. And so that's our goal, is to try to help you be successful through this process. So the basic requirement for all of our grant opportunities, next slide, Cindy, is you must be a 501c3 organization for at least 2 years, or a governmental or a faith-based organization. So if you're not sure, we do have, for several of these, we do have like a qualification quiz that you have to step through. But if you're not sure, before you go to the time and effort to fill out an application, just reach out to us. And then also, one of the new things we have this year, applicants cannot request funds for, is anybody else getting an echo and a feedback? But Jessica Garner says she's getting one, so I don't know. If anybody is, y'all can let us know. So with the duplications there, you can only ask for what you're asking for, like, once. So for instance, if you were asking for car repairs money in Power of the Purse, you couldn't turn around and ask for car repairs also in the community impact grant rounds. We're getting a lot of duplications of requests, and so we really want to be able to make the money to go as far as we possibly can. And so you can't, I think the example we have here, like classroom technology, you couldn't ask for that at 2 different rounds. So whether you get approved or denied, you can't ask for that twice. So that's one of the new things that we've got in there this year. All right, so let's go on to the grant specific requirements. We actually are managing multiple rounds, and so we'll kind of run through and we'll show when some of these are already open now and some of them are not. Some of you may have noticed that Power of the Purse has gotten moved up when it's opening and closing. Our Power of the Purse luncheon this year is going to be May 1st. And so one of the things that the leadership of Power of the Purse asked for last year was they really want to be able to announce the grants at the luncheon. And so we had to shift some things around there, but you'll see we actually are a little bit higher in all the rounds. Our investments did pretty well last year, so we were able to grant more money. So this is how much money will be allocated in each round that's coming up. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the first one. So the first one is our Power of the Purse grants. This one requires that the program or services that you're asking for has to be provided. It's direct services to women and children in Carroll, Haralson, Heard County. There is a maximum request on this one of $2,000. So unlike some of our other ones that don't have a minimum or maximum request, this one actually has a maximum request of $2,000. We've been doing this one for a while. So with this one, this one to me we tend to get a good bit of what I call niche grants. That's just kind of little small things. Sometimes we have funded some what I call kind of trial runs. We had some university professors a few years ago who applied for money so they could do a demonstration grant, so they in turn could apply for an NIH grant. So we do like to. This is probably a little more innovative space. Just those little niche things. We have funded some things like personal hygiene items for young ladies and for older women, whatever. We've also done home delivered meals for seniors in this one. But we've done a variety of things directly providing women and children's assistance in these 3 counties. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next one, which is art enrichment. I don't know if we have any school teachers on the call, but this art enrichment grant is open to state certified music and art teachers and public schools in Carroll, Haralson, and Heard counties for grades pre-K through 12. So with this, you can use the funding for supplies, acquiring supplemental teaching materials, or secure the services of an outside artist. I know we have paid for accompanists for district band competitions, or a lot of schools do not have an accompanist available, so this would allow them to do this. The one thing we do not do with this money, because there is a $1,000 maximum ask on this one, is funds cannot be used to purchase band uniforms. So we've gotten that request a couple times through the years. I don't know that this is as big of an issue as it was a few years ago, but if a teacher is employed at more than one school, they could ask for a grant for each school. So these grants are not awarded on a teacher basis. They're awarded on a per school basis per program. So if you have a music program and an art program at a school, those 2 teachers could apply and get $1,000 each. Last year, this fund was wildly successful, and we got about $16,000 more than the $25,000 we had available. And so we had some extremely generous donors that stepped in and helped us. But this is a very competitive round. If for some reason the teacher transfers to another school, the money does not follow the teacher. The money is awarded to the school. Just kind of a heads up with that. And then also too, we do not fund clubs or after school programs. So if there's like an after school chorus program or an after school, ensemble group or whatever, we want this money to assist both the larger population of the art programs and the music programs. So we don't fund anything that's kids working after school on any particular project. I meant like if it's a club, that level. So, all right, Cindy, we can go ahead and move on to the church grants. And Cindy, you can let me know because I can't see the chat anymore, but if there's some questions, you can pipe in and let me know, and I'll stop. So the church improvement, I always have to say, for several of these grants, like the art enrichment grant and the church improvement, were actually set up by donors. They endowed those funds. So just so you know, some of these rules are not community foundation rules. They were ones that the donor established. So the church improvement guidelines, primarily these grants are for capital improvements to predominantly African American churches in Carroll County only. It focuses on brick and mortar projects to improve the physical condition of the churches. We have done a lot of water damage repair with this. We have done rotting windows and doors with these funds. There is we actually got the donor to agree. This fund typically has $50,000 in it, but because of the high cost of construction materials right now, we asked, would they consider moving up to 75, which he graciously did. So just as kind of a heads up, I mean, if you have a $50,000 project and ask for $50,000 in grants, chances are you're not going to get it. We're not typically, these funds are not awarded to a single church. We try to make these funds go as far as we possibly can. Just a couple of things that we've been asked for in the past, just a heads up, is that we do not pay for chairs, pews, furniture type things, or parking lots. And I know for a lot of you, parking lots would be a big, huge help. But they're also extremely expensive and they would take a lot of the money. So right now, the donor has not agreed to pay for parking lots. The funds have to go to church-owned property. So if a church leases a building, then our funds cannot be used to improve something that you do not own. The church has to be in existence for at least 10 years in order for you to apply. And unlike any of our other grants, this one does require a match requirement. So the applicant church must cover 25% of the project cost, and the grant will provide the remaining 75%. Kind of what we're looking for when we look at these grants is that, what is the need? What do the cost estimates look like? Are they reasonable? I don't know if you can actually use the word reasonable right now with construction costs. They all look unreasonable to me, but anyway, does it seem to kind of fit the scope of the project? What has been the service impact of the church on their local community? How will these improvements, better help the church? Like if we had X repaired, this would help us be able to do, X, Y, and Z. So that's kind of thing to look at. The other one on this one is that a church cannot receive more than 3 grants within a 5-year period. And at this point, this grant's been around for a while. And so we do have some churches that are no longer eligible because they maxed out the number of years. And this may be something that the donor may reconsider at some point in the future. So we'll go ahead and flip on over and look at Trinka Davis. As you guys may know, this is actually a painting of Trinka. She owned a rubber plant that made tires in Bowden, Georgia, and when she passed away, she actually left quite a bit of money to our community. In fact, she left $17 million, which constructed the Trinka Davis Medical Facility out on Bankhead Highway. So if you ever get a chance to go in there, it's absolutely a beautiful facility. There's a lot you can do with $17 million. But in addition to that, the directors of her estate left $500,000 with a community foundation for us to be able to provide. Veterans was something near and dear to her heart. Quite ironically, no one in her family was a veteran, but she remembered watching the film from the Gulf War and previous wars, and it was just really important for her to help veterans. So the grant funds from this one must be used to provide direct services to veterans living in Carroll County. And again, this is another one that was restricted by the donor, but it's direct services to veterans. And so here again, I think we've done home delivered meals, we've done some medical services, we've done a number of things that provide assistance. We've done emergency financial assistance for veterans. So that's one that's available, and that one is opening up I guess in a couple of weeks. All right, so the big one. Let's go ahead and move on to community impact. This is the one I think most people are interested in. And I think we did get a little question a while ago. If you're everybody, if you could mute, I think some of you are maybe getting some feedback. So if you all don't mind muting, unless you want to ask a question a little bit later. So community impact opens up June 1st. And it's also, let me go back to all of our grant applications are online now, all of them. And so if you go to our website, Cindy can pull it up at the end, just kind of show you where to click in. If you've applied in the past, you can go in with your same login, and we'll talk about usernames. We've run into a little bit of issue with that, so we can talk about that a little bit later. So just the eligibility requirements, you must provide programs and services to Carroll, Haralson, and Heard counties. Now, let me just kind of do a little caveat right here, and I'll use an example we had several years ago. Your organization does not have to be based in one of our 3 counties, but the services or the programs that you provide have to benefit our residents of one or more of our cities or counties. Several years ago, we had, I think it was the Red Cross, who wanted to do the AEDs in several of our schools. And so obviously American Red Cross is not based in our community, but the AEDs were going to be based in our community. So that just kind of gives you a little heads up about that. And Cindy's going to talk about this at the very end, but only previously funded organizations may apply if a final report has been submitted, unless the project is for a new program or project. And I know a couple of you kind of take the funding and divide it by 12, and so there's a little bit of overlap. So if there is an issue with you getting your final report in, you need to give Cindy a heads up and let her know, hey, this is kind of going on, and we'll kind of talk through what that can look like. But if you're asking for funds for something totally separate, like for instance, if you ask for money to, I don't know, let's see, do a program for children, and then maybe the next year you want to do a program for family, for the moms and dads, that would be 2 different types of initiatives. So the organization, okay, so we've already talked about you got to be a 501c3 or governmental or faith-based entity, and your program must be in operation for at least 2 years. We do not do startups. So if you have not been, the organization has not been around for at least, had your 501c3 and been around for at least 2 years, you're going to have to sit out till you're eligible. I jokingly say that I spent a lot of money covering up a lot of gray hair that was caused by startups. But it's just, and we're here to support you, but that's, we've just decided no longer just to do startups, which that's not a new rule. We've had that in a while. So ineligible activities. And so if you're not quite sure if what you're wanting to do is eligible, please call us. Cindy's available. I'm available. You can shoot us an email. You can call us because I just don't want you to go to all this work and then Cindy and I go through the first reviews before they go to the grant panels, and we go, oh my gosh, this is a great idea, but it doesn't fit our criteria. So just make sure before you do all this. So what's ineligible? Things like annual fundraising campaigns or fundraising events, charities operated by service clubs. We do have service clubs, like that's Rotary, Lions, Optimist, apply from time to time. But typically, most of your designations are either C4s or C6 and not 501c3s. And so you will have to have some type of C3 group that we actually can write the checks to. We can't legally, the foundation cannot write or grant to a C4 or C6 organization. So I know a lot of the service organizations have a foundation, or they have, a parent organization that they can work with for that. So just kind of keep that in mind. Leased property improvements, again, kind of like the churches. If you don't own your building or your facility, we cannot improve it. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't buy tables and chairs or equipment to use in that building. It's just that we can't, pay for new flooring or new lighting or something in a building that you don't own. The lobbying activities, this I don't think has ever come up, but that's an IRS rule. Operating deficits or debt reduction. If you are in a proverbial financial hole, we can't get you out of that. So we can't our money can't use prior to. And kind of also too, while I'm on that, this has come up a lot. So the calendar, how this runs is August, they're due. Our grant panels review in August and September. Our board votes on it in October, and the funds will be awarded in November. So you all know last year we changed. And so instead of letting you guys request the money and we, split it up over different payments, once we have the grant recognition in November, all the money goes out over the course of the month of November. Once your grant agreement has been submitted back to us. So that's the only thing that kind of holds it up. So if you were to spend money on something in September or October, we can't go retro. We can't reimburse you for stuff you've already spent and done money on. So that has come up a couple of times, and some folks have not been able to get their grant money. So it's a hard thing that we have to do, but we just can't award stuff retroactively. So just keep that in mind. Again, another one is grant programs, organizations that make grants to others. This is not, so what this is not is like if your organization were to provide financial assistance to individuals, that's not what we consider, obviously an individual is not an organization, but if you were to get money, and you were, let's say in a multi-county area, you did a multi-county project, you say, oh, I'm going to give this group in Carroll County money, whatever. We don't turn around. You can't have your own grant program with our funds. We do not do scholarships out of this funds. And so any type of scholarships we do not do. Again, we talked about the startups. And also we do, you can look in our history, we fund a lot of faith-based organizations, but what you can't do is require people, for instance, to go sit through any kind of worship service without getting a bag of groceries or whatever. You can't make that contingent on the goods and services. One thing we've done a little bit differently this year is, you all know this community impact grant application is a pain in the neck. I mean, it's long. It's not anything you can sit down, in about 10 minutes and do. There's a lot of work involved if it's done well. And we are getting $1,000 and $1,500 grant requests. That's not the intent. The intent of community impact projects is what it says. How will this money impact our community, whether you're in Central Hatchie, or if you're in Waco, Georgia, what is a need you see in your community? And so really, these smaller grants, quite frankly, are not going to be, the type of things we want to fund out of this bucket. So the minimum funding request for a community impact grant is going to be $3,000. Now, we don't want you to kind of fluff it up just so you can hit that watermark, but just make sure that the actual cost what you need is necessary to do the project. All right, so if you want to go ahead and flip over to the next one. All right, there have been a few changes to the application. So as some of you may be aware, we've had a couple of changes in our community, first of which is the connector. Last year we asked if you participated with a connector, I think, and so we got a lot of yeses, and we were like, oh, we didn't know you're participating with connector, and so we wanted to be a little more specific about that question. So if you provide services through the connector, we want to know that, and then we're just trying to kind of understand how your organization is connecting to the clients and the need, through the connector. We're all, quote unquote connected in that, if Kim Jones comes in to get services from THS, and then I also go to St. Margaret's, then both of you are able to see, what I've received. And so that will actually help us better see where the needs are and kind of work toward more of a case managed model, which is our long-term goal. I will tell you some of the data that we're getting out of this is really incredible. And one example Julie had a couple of weeks ago, we had a local church who called and said, hey, look, we want to participate with a connector. What is one of the biggest needs? And Julie's like, look, and they gave her a dollar amount, and it wasn't huge, but it was a nice amount. And so she said, well, utilities. And so what they are doing now are doing prepaid utility cards up to the amount that they have available each month. So that is another resource because we're seeing the utility requests be fairly significant. So we're going to run that one and see how that works. A couple of other things, a couple of instances we've had in our community in the last year or so. So we're now want to get some more questions about your board tenure policy. If you even have one, what are your term limits? How do you transition from leadership? And basically, we're looking at how are you kind of ensuring effective governance for your organization. So, like I said, that's a new question this year. If you're not exactly sure, how to answer it, and it doesn't necessarily mean if you say no, you're not going to get money, but it's one thing that our board wants us to be looking at a little more closely as we move forward, particularly when we start awarding pretty significant funds of money. Because, at the end of the day, this is not the foundation's money, this is donors' money. And we're trying to maintain and grow the trust that the donors have in the community foundation, as well as you as organizations. And so when a donor asks us, hey, I'm thinking about giving money to charity X, we want to know at a deeper level, how things are working. The other thing along these lines are, another question is your financial controls. We want to understand your policy and procedures that you have in place to ensure transparency and accountability. Do you have regular board reviews or your financials? This is just examples, dual signatures on checks, and also to an external audit. Not everybody needs to have an audit. And I don't want you to take that away from this conversation. Sometimes it's financial review, or what are the review processes? Like, for instance, at the foundation, our board treasurer comes in every month and reviews our credit card statements. He reviews all banking account statements. I look at them. Julie looks at them. And actually our board chair looks at them. So, what are the extra sets of eyes that you have just to ensure that transparency, accountability, and I encourage my board members, and I hope you do the same for yours, is I want them to ask questions of us because I know they're reading the materials, that we spend a lot of time preparing for them. And then also, they may see something that we didn't see. I had a board member, our very last board meeting, and he apologized for asking a question. I said, don't you ever apologize for that. I said, it worries me more when they don't ask questions because that just makes me think that they may not have at the end of the day, we are really looking at trying to help all the boats rise at the same time with this. How can we operationally strengthen each other? We actually are working with our financial advisor right now, our investment advisor, for them to bring in someone that can, it'll be, an open session for to have your board chairs or any of your board members or you guys to come and basically talk about the fiduciary responsibilities that you have as a board member. I think a lot of board members have no idea when they say yes. And y'all know we have that on board class, but that's kind of a very high level and covers a lot of different topics. But this one will just be on the fiduciary responsibilities of, the board members and the board chair, because there are some pretty significant legal obligations, not to scare anybody, but but it's serious business, and we need to make sure we take it seriously. All right, so we'll go ahead and move over to the tips grant writing.
Tim, we did have one question in the chat. If our organization is older than 2 years, but we will be getting the 501c3 designation this year, will we be eligible for a grant, or does the 501c3 designation have to be at least 2 years?
Yeah, your designation has to be at least 2 years. Sorry about that. But I will tell you this, if you can find a fiscal sponsor, if there's another organization that you could work together, we've done that in the past. But you probably need to pick up the phone and call Cindy or I1 to let us walk you through that, how that needs to work. So, but good question. But yeah, and honestly, the 501c3 is the biggest one of that, because that means you've legally gone through all of the legal requirements to do that. And also too, this is just like a random thing that came in. Please make sure that, because I've had the second phone call in 6 months where an organization thought that their accountant was filing their 990 and they did not. And one of them had not filed it in 4 years, which causes me to question the board, just because everybody, some of you, if you're, less than 25,000, you do the postcard, but after you get past, I think it's either 60 or 72,000, you have to fill out what I call the big form, the full 990. On there, you as an ED or president or whatever your title is, there's a little tiny box at the bottom next to where you sign that says, my board has reviewed this. Please, please, please make sure if you send it out electronically or if you, share it at a board meeting, please make sure that your board members are seeing that 990. That protects you, that protects them. And for goodness sakes, please make sure your accountant or whoever it is filing that thing. The one that's been out 4 years, they will probably lose their 501c3. So that, and they're going to have to kind of refile all over again. So, and it was from a reputable firm, a local firm. So, so they thought. So anyway, there's that. So, and I don't mean to treat you like kindergartners, but this is the most common mistake we see on the grants, is that it was pretty obvious how they responded to the question, that they didn't read the guidelines carefully. So just make sure you understand things like eligibility, like criteria, our funding priorities, any other specific requirements that are in that grant application, because we don't want to disqualify you. As I kind of started out on the beginning of this call, is, it does not make me happy, and it doesn't make Cindy happy either when we have to go, oh shoot, we got to pull this one because they don't meet the requirements, because we want to give you guys the very best possibility of getting funded. Yes, it's very competitive. I mean, even though that $300,000 is a lot of money, we generally get about 3 to 1. So you can take that number and triple it. And that's generally, we get at least $1 million in requests every year, generally speaking. So so sometimes, you do everything right, still don't get money. But then that gives us an opportunity. We have donors now. We are managing about 140, 150 funds, I think, at this point. And a lot of them are regularly asking, who needs money? What's going on? How can I help? So, and so we want to be able to have some things in the ready to be able to say, hey, look, we weren't able to fund this one, but we just didn't have enough money. Also, to be clear and concise, and again, this kind of sounds like kindergartner stuff, but I can't stress this enough. Many of you that's been around for a while know that I started out writing grants long time ago, and I don't wish to go back to that world again if I can help it. But just, you do what you do every day and really well. But a lot of times we get caught up into it, the foundation, and we get, there's certain terminology or certain acronyms that we just kind of throw around. And the people that are reading these may not be familiar with those. And so you're not insulting anybody's intelligence when you kind of spell things out. The more simpler you can kind of connect the dots for them, the better that they can follow your train of thought and kind of see. The main thing is that the rule of thumb that I think works really well is if you can hand off your narrative or hand off to someone who's maybe not real familiar with your organization, if they can read that and tell you, okay, this is what you want to use the money for, or this is the need, and this is how you're going to use the funds, then you're golden. You've gone really, you've done exactly what you need to do. So just make sure that it's clear as it possibly can be. I don't mind, reviewing some of those narratives for you. If you're not sure, I'll be more than happy to, to look at those and say, yep, I got it. I understand exactly. Or here's some things that might, trip them up when they're reading. These are usually folks that are very involved in our community, but, they don't run a soup kitchen. They don't, pay for hotels for people. So this is a way to really enlighten them about what you do. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I learned something from you guys every single year. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I didn't know that that's what you were doing. So just make sure that it's just really, really as clear as you possibly can make it. All right, we'll go to the next slide. The realistic budget. And I know this tends to get people tripped up. We're really just trying to see what your overall budget is and what you're going to be using the foundation's money to do. And and a couple of things that gets people tripped up in this is that the one thing we have to caution on as a funder is we cannot fund more than 30% of your overall budget. That's actually called tipping. Again, going back to the 990, if you're on the full form, there is a public support test, and the IRS says that you should not have one source, whether it be a donor, a grant, or whatever, that funds more than 30% of your operating budget. So that's one of the things we have to kind of look for. Now, technically speaking, the IRS gives you 3 years to push that over those 3 years. However, we just don't want to get caught into that and cause you harm. We want to help, not harm. So just, and I know here again, I'm sorry if I'm insulting your intelligence, but please make sure your numbers add up. Most of these grant panels have a number cruncher in there, and they will add the numbers up. And I can't tell you how many times those numbers do not add up. And particularly when you say, I need, let's just say $10,000, and then they go to the very beginning of the application and it says that you need 12,000. I go, wait a minute, they're asking for 10 over here and 12 over here. What are they really asking for? And here again, it kind of makes them think that somebody didn't think it all the way through. So just, and if you're not a math person, just get somebody to double check your numbers for you. And also to make sure that what you're asking for money, the scope of work actually fits. A lot of times this is not a big issue, but if you ask for $10,000 to buy 2 tables and 6 chairs, we're going to wonder what kind of table is that, and what kind of bells and whistles does it have. So just make sure it's realistic. And like I said, this typically has not been an issue, but just kind of want to raise the question to make sure. That's just one of those things you kind of think through. And then also any kind of data or real world examples. These don't have to be, and this usually ends up being an issue for some of our university folks. I'm not asking to have, data points footnoted and MLA standards and all that kind of stuff. But we do want to see, like from your heart, like, why do you think this is a need? I mean, or how has, if you've got funding in the past, how has that helped? One of the questions we get probably a good bit, particularly for organizations that's gotten funding multiple years, is they're like, was this really working? And so anything that you can share along those lines to really illustrate the need for what you're asking for. And not, you don't necessarily have to have a sad sob story. It's just nonprofits wouldn't exist if you guys didn't see a need out in the community. And so you should be able to really share why and what we need to do to do that. So, Cindy, I saw a couple of questions pop up in the chat. Do you want to grab those?
Yeah. So the question was the 1/3 of the total budget rule as far as funding. Does that rule apply to planning grants as well?
It's any kind of grant that we fund, it applies to. Is there another one? Was that the only one?
That's it for now.
Right. Also here again, please check your spelling, your grammar, mathematical errors. And I mean, and this goes for all of our grant rounds. I mean, the art enrichment grants, I mean, all of them. Just make sure somebody proofs it, just to make sure that it makes sense. There's no spelling, we all, and two, sometimes, and Cindy, you make an answer because I cannot remember in our grant module if it checks for spelling errors, but you can always, throw it into the grant module, cut and paste it out, throw it into a Word doc and have it, check your grammar just to make sure. We have no English majors on this, but, just making sure it reads and makes sense. And kind of going back to the strong narrative, you're basically kind of just sharing a story of what the need is in the community and how it can be, how this funding would help address that. So the more, engaging you make it, the better, chance. And Cindy and I looked through some examples, but we don't want to embarrass anybody. But we've gotten some where, you're just like, it just read like, wonk, wonk. I mean, there was just no passion there. It's just like, we need X for Y. And that was it. And then you get another one where it talks about, the personal elements of why, this is so important, how this money can change our community and change people's lives. All righty. So is there any other questions anybody to ask before we jump in? And I know once you get into these grants and are able to open them up. The one thing I was going to mention right quick, we ran into this, just a word of suggestions. And if you've already done this, Cindy may can help you do this, but particularly organizations that depend on volunteers, they had, let's just say, Kim Jones at cfwg.net. I applied. And then let's see, now this year, Cindy's going to write the grant. So we want you to log back in about organization. So you may want to create like an info or just a generic email address that you can put into GLM. So no matter who applies from year to year, is able to go back in there. Because a lot of times people say, hey, can you show me the grant application from last year? Well, it's not the same person. And so sometimes we're able to open them up and sometimes we're not. And so I know that saves you a lot of work, being able to carry stuff over from year to year. And that's one of the beauties of GLM, is that you don't have to do some of the stuff over and over and over. But Cindy, you may want to speak to that a little bit more than I probably convoluted that.
No, that's fine. So, like a specific example was, I mean, kind of what Kim touched on a little bit. We had an organization that needed to go in and do their final report for a grant, but the final report was assigned to the grant writer, who was no longer with the organization. They could not get in touch with this person, and it's not a simple thing. I learned how to do it in that moment. I'd have to relearn how to do it again because it kind of, we had to jump through some hoops. We were able to reassign it to another person. But if you can have, like an organization level login for your grants that multiple people could have access to, that's going to make things easier on everyone, on you guys too, because trying to get in touch with people that you haven't seen since last year when they wrote the grant is not as easy as you might think it is. So that's just that's the overwhelming advice in that situation. Kim, Rachel has actually got a question if she wants to unmute.
All right.
Good morning. On the new questions regarding the board and the financial policies, I understand those are to evaluate the soundness of our organization, but will they also be used as comparative towards other grant applications and organizations?
Yes and no, Rachel. That's a good question. I think that if we were to have a higher level of confidence in an organization because they had certain policies and procedures in place, yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, because here again, this is not our money. This is donor money, and we're trying to ensure and continue to have their trust in not only the foundation, but also the organizations we're choosing to fund. And so, yes, that will make a difference. But we know everybody already has those in place, or pretty close to having in place, we hope. But if you have some questions about, because I know all of you, not everybody is organized the same way. I mean, the Community Foundation, we're quirky and we understand that. So, if you have some questions about, your organization and how those questions, how you need to answer those, or, call me. I'm more than happy to talk through. So we didn't necessarily mean those to be a disqualifier. We're hoping that gives you a chance to tell that kind of internal story that nobody really asked sometimes, of how you're governed and how those decisions are made, and particularly with financial controls. That's probably one of the biggest questions I'm getting right now from donors, is how do you know it's going where it's supposed to go? And so we've got to go back and work on some trust in those areas. All right, Cindy, I'll let you talk about final reports.
Okay, I won't keep you guys too long for this, but final reports and why they matter. Okay, so I hope everybody on here follows us on social media. If you don't, you need to. We post some really cool stuff. But if you do follow us on social media, then over the last 2 to 3 weeks, I have been posting final reports from the POP grants last year. And I try to do this like when a new grant opens up. just to kind of showcase like what past grant recipients have done with the money. So I feel like maybe some people think the final report is kind of a drag and, kind of a burden and don't want to fill that out. But I want you to think of it as an opportunity and not just a requirement, because we're going to go over these reasons. It gives you an opportunity to showcase your impact. So, anytime you have the opportunity to amplify your message and to get your mission out there, it's good. You've got more eyes on it. The community foundation is going to have followers that you may not have for your organization. So it's an opportunity to introduce you and your work to a whole new group of people. It could attract future funding. A strong report helps us share success stories with donors, and that increases the potential support for your work. Not only do I put them on social media, but we send out monthly newsletters. Sometimes I'll include a really stellar report in there. Oh, hold on. Rachel got bumped out. Let me bring her back in. And the more eyes you have on it, the better. It amplifies your message. Your work deserves to be seen. We know you guys are excited about the projects that you're doing. We know that you're passionate about the community and about your work, and this just helps showcase that. Now, here's the big thing that I want to talk about in the final reports is pictures. I know that in every situation, you may not be able to grab a picture because of confidentiality issues. Some people have HIPAA stuff going on, but if your organization asks for, like Kim said earlier, a table and chairs, please don't send me a picture of a table and chairs. Y'all, that is the most boring, the most boring thing to look at. Show your volunteers unloading the table and chairs. Show somebody like kicked back in their chair with the feet on the table, giving 2 thumbs up. There's going to be somebody, either a volunteer or somebody that benefits from your services. There will be a person that's willing to be in a picture and let you take their photo. We want to have permissions, of course, so make sure that you have permission from any person that you include in that picture. But there's a way to showcase something that seems mundane, maybe like table and chairs or doors or a computer. There's a way to make that more engaging than just taking a picture of an actual object. I'm always here if you have any questions. If you're like, hey, Cindy, I took this picture. I don't know. Can I shoot it to you? See what you think about it? Yes, please. I would love that so much, because the better the picture is and the better your final report, as far as like, even kind of going back to the grant writing, if it's engaging, you're telling the story, give some examples, get a quote from someone. We don't have to use their name, but just ask someone, how did this project impact your life? If you can stick a quote in there. We're telling a story here. And a picture's worth 1,000 words. So if we have good words and we have a good picture, then we've got a good story. And it's good for you. It's good for everybody. It also builds trust. So I know trust has kind of come up already in this conversation. When you show, that you use the funds for what the initial request was for, then that just helps build that trust and strengthen that with the community. So I'm always here to help with final reports. I love that. It is my jam. I love storytelling. I love getting these stories out in the communities. I'm always available. If you ever have any questions, there's not a dumb one or a small one. I'm happy to help you in any way. Call me, email me, and I will walk you through it, and we'll make the best final report ever.
Does anybody have any questions for Cindy? Like she said, these final reports, they do matter. I can't tell you how many times we cut and splice and use them all the time. And so and sometimes you'll see some of them more than once, because the ones that, we use some of them more than once. And like I said, and it really helps us also too, because I know that what we give you the money for is not usually 100% of the funding that you need. And so here again, I cannot tell you, we got some really significant donors toward the end of last year, and one of them walked in here and he said, I have no idea, kind of what's going on in the community. And we had a really good conversation, and he dropped some significant money in some organizations. Once we kind of had a conversation, he really did have a passion. He just didn't realize he had it. And after we had some some really good conversations. He told me his wife came in one day. She goes, "We are having so much fun giving away money," and I said, "Well, I'm fun too," you know. So we, you know, that is really good. So then they get the feedback of, you know, from what you guys are doing, and so. It never hurts to kind of drop me an email or drop me an email, even if it's between a grant round, and say, "Hey, look, you know, I'm looking for money for X or Y, or I'm looking for this particular, you know, you have a need, you know, tables, chairs, or, you know, file folders, whatever." I mean, sometimes it's just random stuff that you need, and we happen to run across it. So we're always willing to share. But I appreciate all of you being on the call. Does anybody have any burning questions that might keep you up tonight other than the storm? All right. Well, thank you all so much for being on the call. I hope this was helpful. Oh, I see everybody's shining faces now. Yay. So I hope this was helpful. Again, Cindy did record it, so we will have that up on our social media links and also the website. Of course, if you want to apply, it's cfwg.net, and then click the button. It'll take you right to the GLM. So if there's any questions we can answer for you later on, just let us know. And I hope you guys go out and have a great day. We appreciate everything that you guys do.